Good evening. Welcome to the Thursday, August 18th regular Board of Education meeting. And with that, we have a roll call from Ms. Haas.
Mrs. Bukta? Here. Mr. Rogers?
Here.
Mrs. Selly?
Here.
Mrs. Reynolds? Here. Mr. Nickram?
Here. Alrighty, and we'll do a Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As customary with all of our board meetings, we always start off by reading the vision and mission statement. And the vision statement is achieving distinction in all that we do. And mission statement is cultivate an inclusive, high-performing culture of growth and community. Alrighty, and next up, do we have any comments from the audience? All right, seeing as there is none. And
We don't want that group making comments tonight.
Far too risky. All right, seeing that there is none and none that was submitted, we can roll on to the consent agenda. Dr. Abbott?
Sure, as we hear every month, that Robert's Rules provide for a consent agenda listing several items for approval of the board in a single motion. Documentation concerning these items have been provided to all board members in advance to assure an extensive and thorough review, and they will become part of the permanent record. Items may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any board member. This evening, you have the following items. Item A, minutes from July 21, 2022 regular meeting and August 4, 2022 special meeting. Item B, personnel. This evening, we have the following appointments and transfers. James Lemire to 1.0 FTE Social Studies teacher at Fort Atkinson Middle School. Michelle Blow, 1.0 FTE Literacy Interventionist at Rockwell Elementary School. And Lindsay Scheibel, 1.0 FTE Grade 4 teacher at Berry Elementary School. We also have item C, gifts to the school district. The board would accept the following donations with great thanks. A donation from TopCon Positioning Systems of 24 pallets of wood to the Career and Technical Education Department with an approximate value of $24,547. And a donation from Aaron and Mitch Patterson and the customers of Patty Coughlin's Pub of the school supplies from their Christmas in July donation drive with an approximate value of $250. Then there's item D, payment of district bills and the treasurer's report.
Move to accept and file.
Any other comments or any discussion on any of the consent agenda items?
We may need a second.
I'll second.
Yeah, I understand. I just want to make sure there's no other discussion before we get a motion there, Speedy.
Well, usually
Yeah.
get it moved and then
Yeah.
discuss.
Yep. All righty, so there we go. We have a motion by Mr. Rogers, a second by Ms. Reynolds. All those in favor? No, vote, roll call. See, I wasn't quite there yet. Apologize. I
Tripped him up.
We're off to a hot start already.
Yeah, no, you're up here doing good.
All righty, Ms. Haas.
Mrs. Reynolds?
Yes.
Mrs. Bukta?
Yes.
Every time.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Mrs. Selly?
Yes.
Mr. Nickram?
Yes. All right, moving on to non-instruction.
Yes, each year the board by state statute is required to accept by formal action the student and parent handbooks attached for the community to gain access to through any of the district's websites as well as board docs. And of course, through the agenda this evening, you have all of the handbooks throughout the entire school district listed there for you. They are updated yearly and are an extension of policy. Therefore, we'd ask the following action be taken.
All right. I know these were obviously great length and a lot of content here, and I know they've been certainly updated since last year, and more things have been put in there. But is there any further questions or comments on the handbooks tonight?
In regards to the elementary school, are there differences between the handbooks in, like, amongst the schools, or is there consistency within them?
The elementary team has really worked hard over the past years to make them more consistent, and Miss Weidenfeller this year worked with the principals and their staff as well. So there is a consistent base, and then they are nuanced by school that in certain situations where it makes sense for them to be different.
Any other discussions at all? All right, we need a motion.
So be it resolved that the general and supplemental student parent handbooks for Berry, Luther, Purdy, and Rockwell Elementary Schools, Fort Atkinson Middle School, Fort Atkinson High School, Fort Atkinson High School Athletic Code of Conduct, and Special Education Procedural Safeguards be approved as extensions of board policy and approved for use in the 2022-23 school year.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Ms. Selly and a second by Ms. Reynolds. Oh, man. And a voice vote. All those in favor? Aye. And those opposed? Thank you. All right. And moving on to the October board meeting date.
Yes, we are requesting that the board move from their regular third Thursday meeting in October. We get certain budget information from the state on October 15th, which would make it nearly impossible for us to have all of the information assimilated for you to pass the actual tax levy. Therefore, we are suggesting moving the October meeting to that of Tuesday, October 25th.
This is customary, obviously, that we've done in a number of years past, so.
Yeah.
Good. Discussion on that at all?
I just wanted to make one note that due to a work trip that I will be attending via Zoom. So
Okay.
there are no surprises when I'm on the big screen again.
Yeah, we
We
enjoyed that.
appreciate it last time. It actually worked out pretty
Just to
well.
warn you.
Yeah. Good. All right. We have a motion on that tonight?
Be it resolved that the October board meeting be conducted on Tuesday, October 25th, 2022, starting at 6:30 PM.
I'll second.
All right, do we have a motion by Ms. Bookta, a second by Ms. Selly? All those in favor?
Aye.
And those opposed? All right. January board meeting.
Yes, we typically do this later in fall, but we thought since we were moving meetings, why not get this out there sooner than later? The annual school board convention taking place in Milwaukee is always that third week of January. In the last few years, through COVID and in some cases snow and inclement weather, I think your state organization is hoping for a conference that's able to go off without a hitch this year. Nonetheless, that conference is Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and the board typically moves their meeting from Thursday, in this case, to Tuesday, January 17th, to allow board members who would like to attend to be able to attend on Thursday.
Good. Fantastic. All right, and we will need a motion for that as well tonight.
Be it resolved that the January board meeting be conducted on Tuesday, January 17th, 2023, starting at 6:30 PM.
I'll second.
Second.
Should beat you. All right. A motion by Ms. Reynolds, a second by Ms. Selly, and all those in favor?
Aye.
And those opposed? All righty. Moving on to item D, consider approval of expenditure for replacement of technology devices.
Yes, as has been practiced in the past, we're requesting for the board, in order to make a significant purchase, this case replacing certain technology devices through some financing we have in hand, and then our ability to borrow from the fund balance in order to make a much greater or significant order all at once. You have two resolutions there for you. The first is that of requesting the loan, that is borrowing money from the fund reserve and our fund balance rather. And then the second action is required as well, which details a specific plan for the repayment of those funds to the fund balance. Again, this is a practice that we have used in the past, and it's been very effective sometimes in helping us get things we need sooner, or secure better pricing, or have greater consistency, in this case with technology items throughout the district, and the list goes on. There is also a memo attached that I know the board has read, but the community can view, from Mr. Scullin, our Director of Technology, that details more explicitly this particular request.
Very good. All right. Any comments or thoughts on letter E tonight? All right, and will we need a motion on that? Darren?
So moved. Be resolved that the Board of Education, in accordance with Board Policy 6235, fund balance, authorize one-time capital equipment expenditure of up to $127,584 in the 2022-23 fiscal year for the purchase of replacement technology devices in the district, and that said purchase is considered a loan under Board Policy 6235. Again, I so move.
All right.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Ms. Rogers, a second by Ms. Bukta, and that is a roll call. Ms. Haas.
Mrs. Selly,
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mrs. Bukta,
Yes.
Mr. Rogers,
Yes.
Mr. Nickram.
Yes. All right, and we have a second resolution here upon us.
So be it resolved that the Board of Education, in accordance with Board Policy 6235, fund balance, direct administration to decrease the technology budget by up to $42,528 per year for fiscal years 2023-24, 2024-25, 2025-26 to repay the loan from fund balance for the one-time purchase of technology devices in the 2022-23 fiscal year.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Selly, a second by Ms. Reynolds, and another roll call. Ms. Haas.
Mr. Rogers,
Yes.
Mrs. Selly,
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mrs. Bukta,
Yes.
Mr. Nickram.
Yes. All righty, moving on to letter F of the meeting.
Yes, so Mr. Demarath has prepared a report to share with the board leading into items E, F, and G that the board will consider here in just a few moments.
All right, thank you. The purpose of this presentation this evening is to quickly recap for the board and community the proposed referenda for November leading up to your approval of the motions needed so the referenda can go on the ballot for November 8th. Let's begin with a recap of where we have come over the past couple of years in our strategic facilities planning and the proposed capital referendum. As you know, we had a facilities advisory committee of community members and staff that were charged with developing a long-term master plan for investment in our facilities. Ultimately, the master plan was determined along with a phasing timeline. As you see here, the projects that are being finished up at the high school were phase 1, and what we are now discussing is phase 2. As we have discussed over the past couple of months, we're recommending that phase 2 be further phased over the next few years based on the feedback we received from the community this year. Phase 3 will then be somewhere down the road, maybe in about 10 years, to address what we want to do long-term with the 4 elementary schools. As we have discussed in previous meetings, we now have a modified plan that is being recommended based on community feedback and what we learned over the past year. At the high school, we would look to do a secure entry sequence and finalize phase 1 projects and continue other maintenance projects. But we would also look at addressing traffic flow, as that was a concern that was repeated from the community. Also, with the new development happening just to the east of the property, we have an opportunity in the near future to address this concern in conjunction with the city. At the elementary schools, we would also look to do secure entry sequences and take care of urgent maintenance and mechanical needs to get those buildings through the next 10 years until phase 3 of the plan can be initiated. It is important to note that at these schools, we will not be doing any structural remodeling of learning spaces to modernize and update them. We would only be doing work to have those buildings operate as is for the next 10 years. At the middle school is where we see the largest change. The master plan had called for a replacement of that building by looking to build a new middle school at the high school site. Based on community feedback, the replacement of that building would be put on hold for a few years, and we would look to do a highly modified secure entry sequence and only tackle maintenance needs to get that building to operate as is for another 5 years. So we would be drastically limiting what we are spending at that building with the thought of a possible new middle school being built in about 5 years, and we would begin planning for a November 2026 referendum for that building project. The total estimated cost of this modified plan, or the beginning of phase 2 of the master plan, is $22 million. One of the main reasons for this modified plan is that it has become apparent over the past year that operational costs need to be a focus right now, and so we will also be discussing a proposed operational referendum for November. Going back to the reasoning for the further phasing of phase 2 of the master plan, we asked for feedback from our community regarding the plan, and we're listening to that feedback. We heard that there was a concern about increasing taxes, especially after the passage of the city referendum in April. We also heard that with the current economic climate and the high inflation and future uncertainty, the question was being asked if now is the right time to build a new middle school. As a result, we have the proposed further phasing of our master plan to address these concerns, and I want to stress that we're continuing to work through the same long-range strategic master facilities plan. We're just taking our time based on the current environment that surrounds our organization. One of those environmental factors is the election coming in November for the governorship and what that might mean for the next state budget, which will have a large impact on our district. With that coming up and what we have seen in the last 2 years with the state budget, our primary concern has shifted to operational funding as a result of no new state revenue and our federal COVID relief funding ending, creating a fiscal cliff that we need to prudently address with long-term vision. One of the ways we are proposing to address this cliff, as well as these capital projects, is through a referendum this fall that implements a plan we have been working towards for quite some time. Over the course of this summer, we've continued to work with Baird, our financial advisor, regarding debt structure and wrapping the capital debt around an operational referendum. As a result, we're proposing that the current non-recurring amount of $3 million that expires at the end of this year be shifted to recurring, just as we have done with our prior 2 non-recurring referenda that expired, where we then came back for voter approval to make those amounts recurring. With no new revenue projected at this point, given the uncertainty at the state level, we would then ask for $4 million non-recurring in 23-24 and 24-25, and $5 million non-recurring in 25-26. All of these non-recurring amounts would be one-time amounts just in those particular fiscal years. They do not carry over from year to year. I will also transparently share up front that what is actually levied for operations in 2023 through 2026 will depend on financial changes that take place between now and then. Since the final year is 4 years from now, we will see a couple of state budgets between now and then that would impact us. So the board in those years will have to take external factors like that into account each year as they set the tax levy. What we would be asking for here in this referendum is permission that these are the maximum amounts that would be levied for operations, but they could possibly be less based on what changes may come our way. As we have demonstrated through our phasing of the Strategic Facilities Master Plan, we are always sensitive to our impact on the community and will carefully consider things each year as we go through the next few years of this operational referendum. What you can see here is the impact that this operational referendum would have on our operational budget. With no new revenue from the state being forecasted, you can see in red the significant operational deficits we face, even with the attritions we made this year, and only factoring in salary and wage increases of 3% each year, even though inflation is pushing 9% right now. If we focus in on just the years that this operational referendum would cover, I'll start with mentioning that we are always planning longer term than 1 year. So what we see here is the 3 years of our current referendum, followed by the 3 years of the proposed referendum. If we look at the cumulative deficit over the course of these combined 6 years, it would be $1.6 million, even with the proposed referendum, given no new revenue from the state. In thinking longer term as we do, we would have 4 years to address this $1.6 million through additional attritions, strategic abandonments, and or new state revenue through the next 2 biennial budgets. During these upcoming years, we will also be considering whether or not to continue the positions being funded by the ESSER federal COVID relief funds as those funds expire. We believe managing this cumulative deficit over this time is achievable without a significant impact to programming, and will carefully consider how to manage it each fiscal year through our annual budget development process. Now let me summarize everything that you heard this evening and that we've been working towards over the past year, as well as illustrate again the projected tax impact of what is being proposed. Through our management of our debt and the full retirement of that debt on the horizon, coupled with an increase in state aid without a revenue limit increase, we're able to do everything that was discussed this evening with minimal impact to the tax rate over the next 4 years. I'll illustrate this further in a moment. To summarize the total referendum package being proposed for November 8th, on the capital side, we would install secure entries and address urgent maintenance needs at all 6 of our buildings, as well as improve traffic flow at the high school site as the new neighborhood comes online over there, for a total cost of $22 million, financed through 20-year bonds. On the operational side, We would have one question with two parts. The first part is for $3 million recurring beginning this year, and the second part is for $4 million non-recurring in 23-24 and 24-25, and then $5 million non-recurring in 2025-26. I'll again mention that through this referendum, we're asking voters permission to levy up to those amounts. So these would be maximums that we would levy for operations, but as the financial environment changes over the next 4 years, the board could consider levying less than those amounts accordingly. In addition to these referendum questions this fall, we'll continue to plan and message for a referendum in November 2026 to build a new middle school. To illustrate the tax rate impact of everything we've been working towards for the past year, we have the tax rate history along with the projection for the next 5 years added here, incorporating this referendum, and a preliminary look at the tax rate in 2026-27 with the new middle school. As you can see, there's room in the current year's tax rate to do everything we shared this evening with minimal tax rate impact. In fact, over the course of these 4 years, it's our intention to keep the tax rate steady should this referendum be approved by the voters. We say that, but also want to be transparent with taxpayers about how this will impact their personal taxes. I want to stress again that it's our intention to keep the district's portion of the tax rate stable over the course of this referendum through 2025-26. Based on the feedback we received from the community during our year-long meaningful conversations with focus groups, surveys, and open forums, we know that taxes are a worry right now. We also want to be completely transparent and upfront about what it means when we say that it's our intention to maintain a stable tax rate for district operations. So what does that mean for the local homeowner and taxpayer? It means if a home's value increases, the school taxes on that property will increase accordingly. So if a home value increases 5%, then school taxes on that property will increase 5% because that additional value will be taxed. It also means that if there's an increase in the cost of private school vouchers, the school tax rate and taxes on the homeowner's property will increase as well. We're simply told by the state how much to tax the local taxpayers to pay for private school vouchers, and that's the only information we receive. This portion of our school tax levy is simply a pass-through mechanism for the local taxpayer to pay for private school vouchers. So while it's our intention for the tax rate for public school operations to remain stable for the next 4 years, these two factors will impact how a property owner's tax bill changes from year to year. This graph further illustrates the impact of private school vouchers on the tax rate. You can see that the public school tax rate has remained stable since 2018-19 and would remain stable under these proposed referendum questions. In fact, it's lower and projected to continue to be lower than the tax rate a decade ago. However, over the past few years, the private school voucher part of the tax rate, as shown in red, has continued to increase. We show that part of the tax rate remains the same at this point because we get no information whatsoever about how many students are using private school vouchers or are projected to use private school vouchers. We don't know how much the state wants us to tax our local taxpayers each year for these vouchers until October of that year. Based on prior trend, it would appear that this part of the tax rate would continue to increase, but we have no idea what to project because we have no information to make any assumptions. Finally, let's get to what the actual questions on the ballot would look like so that as the board considers approval of the referendum resolutions this evening, everyone has an idea of what the voters will see. This is what would appear on the ballot for the operational question. As you can imagine, it gets quite complicated with different amounts and a recurring and non-recurring portion. It will be important to communicate this prior to the referendum, what this question means and what voting yes and voting no on this question means. This is what would appear on the ballot for the $22 million debt issuance for the capital improvement portion of the referendum. A bit simpler here as the voter is just approving whether or not the district can issue $22 million in general obligation bonds. So the next step to make this happen is that the board would approve the 3 resolutions before you this evening. The first resolution is to issue bonds for the capital referendum. The second is the revenue cap resolution for the operational side of the referendum. And the third is to put both of those questions before the voters at the November 8th election. Be happy to answer any questions the board may have at this time. Otherwise, the resolutions were provided for you by our attorney in your board packet.
Just so I understand this, when you say recurring, that $3 million is every year through that, I think it's a 4-year period, right?
No, the $3 million gets added to our base in the state revenue limit calculation, which means it's there forever.
Okay,
Yep, beyond
end
the
of
4
time.
years. Yep.
and then the non-recurring is just.
The non-recurring is just a certain amount each year for those 3 years, and then it goes away.
Yeah, and my other question is, tell me again, how much of the operational, not the operational, but for school maintenance and upkeep is going to the middle school? Is it 5 million of the 22 million?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I'd have to go back and look.
I don't know that I can come up with a number just off the top of my head either. Essentially, as Jason's mentioned, and we talked about last month as well, we're doing the absolute bare minimum to get through 5 years, but I can't give you a number. It's a relatively small portion of that 22.
Again, the only reason I bring it up is I'm getting people asking why we should be spending money on a building that we're
Yeah.
going to
Well, and what's
demolish in a couple of years.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. What's frustrating for us is it's because we can't not do the work. So we'd like to be able to keep kids in a learning environment that is A, safe, B, somewhat accessible, and C, like in a condition that we will continue to attract and retain families and kids to our middle school. So, you know, that's sort of the double-edged sword we've been playing with deferring, which is a legitimate need in constructing a new middle school, but in choosing to stay, we're going to need to do at least minimum work in order to get us to that point. And I think, Mr. Rogers, this question is definitely one that we will be integrating into our communication package, going to referendum, because it's perhaps fiscally prudent for some of the feedback that we've gotten throughout this process for some, but frustrating for other people as well.
And interestingly enough, that's the only question I'm getting. I don't know
Yeah.
other members of the board.
And honestly, as we were working through this process, we knew that question would come. It's sort of darned if you do and darned if you don't,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah, that's fair. I've got very similar questions, why we're putting money in the middle school. I mean, the fact of the matter is, you some of the things you just can't avoid, right? Like,
So as one example, and the architects and the construction company noted last month, and we chose not to get into a lot of detail, but had the FAC landed on an option of renovating the existing building, which of course we came to terms with the fact that that wasn't a prudent direction moving forward. But in the original schematics of that option, doing the secured entrance sequence at the middle school would have been a multi-million-dollar element of that construction process. It would have been a complete reconfiguration of the office suite. It would have been additional structure outside of the building. It would have been a much different approach in this scenario to get us through the next 5 years, because we believe that the middle school needs to have a secure entry sequence just like the elementaries. It's a matter of putting certain doors in certain inconvenient places that will impact traffic flow at the middle school, but we know that we can live with for 5 years to get them that step of safety. So those are the types of elements that have been extremely modified in order to accommodate keeping that number as low as possible. And quite honestly, you know, if we had additional funds to spend elsewhere in other facilities or buildings, I mean, there are things that we could be doing with that as well, so.
thank you. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Demrath? I think this is, I don't know how many meetings we've had this, Jay, but I appreciate the information provided tonight. I'm looking forward to moving forward with this process. Thanks. So,
Me too.
And I know from meeting to meeting, sorry, Jason. That's okay. I know from meeting to meeting, you've said, you know, you continue to get updated information based on, you know, just what's going on in the economy and stuff. But the numbers have stayed pretty consistent throughout with the 3 million recurring, 4 million non-recurring, 5 million non-recurring, and the 22 million. There haven't been any more projections that these operational maintenance costs would go up or would increase?
No, built into the $22 million is a couple years of inflation that's higher than normal construction inflation because of what's happening right now. On the operational side, in our projection, we were using no new state revenue for operations over the next 4 years, which will largely depend on probably the elections this fall and then the budget coming this spring. So hopefully it doesn't go down, but right now we're projecting 0 for the next 4 years from state increases in operations.
Okay.
I think we've done a nice job of controlling what we can control, right? When it comes to some of these private school vouchers and some of the unknowns with construction, I think we've done a really nice job of being really mindful of the money that we're spending and things like that. So it just, as we go through the process, it's like, it's been, something on the top of my mind's been like, we're doing a really nice job of just controlling those things that we can control, and continue to move forward with it, so.
I think the other part of that too, as I mentioned in the presentation, is inflation right now pushing 9%, but in the projection is 3% wage increases, which if the board wants to give more than that, then it'll be looking to do what we did this spring, which is attrition some positions in order to provide more for the positions that are here, or if there's new state revenue or whatever it might be. Just working within what's available.
And with all 3 referendums passing, it's
2 questions.
2 questions.
Yep.
2 questions, one with a two-parter. With all that passing, the tax rate stays the same.
Right.
The only impact it would have to a person's personal tax bill is just the assessment on your house and the private school vouchers, of which the school district can't do anything about.
Right.
It has it doesn't have any control over.
Right.
And we don't have any control about the value of their house either.
That's what I mean, the value of the house or the
Right.
private school vouchers is
Right.
out of our hands, and this would just keep the tax rate the same.
Yeah, I just don't want to say that your taxes on your home will stay the same, because if
Sure.
your value goes up, your taxes are going to increase, so.
The tax rate stays the same.
Right,
Yep.
tax rate stays the same.
Yeah, that's an important distinction, but one that I think is important to keep reiterating over and over again, just that we can't impact whether your house is valued at $150,000 or $175,000 next year.
If you look back over the referendum cycles over the past many years, the level of precision in forecasting has really been pretty remarkable. There hasn't been a situation where we've needed to come back and make a lot of apologies for things that weren't perhaps forecasted as well as they could have been. That's just simply not been the case here. And certainly things are are more dynamic perhaps in some of those elements than they had been in the past. But I think, as you've heard Mr. Demarath work through, like, we're definitely trying to adjust and remain somewhat nimble should some of those dynamics change moving forward.
Well, I think you should be commended for keeping us out of debt too, or getting us out of debt.
Mhm.
I think that's going to help us going forward.
How many
a
years
lot.
early?
Well, yeah, it's all part of, I guess, the long-term plan. We had stretched it out at one point and then started pulling it back as we were able to. So, yeah, I think we went from stretching it out 5 years to almost pulling it back almost all 5, so.
Well, and I appreciate you coming meeting after meeting and explaining it and dumbing it down for us in a way that's easy to understand, especially with these complicated projections. But I think it's important. I mean, I think it's important for us to discuss it over and over again, because this is, I mean, it's going to be on a ballot. It's a big impact to the community, and if we can't understand it, then it can be really detrimental to the school district.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amen.
Alrighty, we have we have items E, F, and G in front of us. I would prefer if we can handle E and F in front of us and fully read out if possible here, with the resolutions in front of us here, so.
All right, I'll read the long one. Be it resolved that the school board of the school district of Fort Atkinson, Jefferson, and Rock Counties, Wisconsin, that there shall be issued pursuant to Chapter 67 Wisconsin statutes, general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $22 million for the purpose of paying the cost of secure entry sequence improvements, maintenance, and mechanical projects at all buildings and traffic flow improvements at the high school. Be it further resolved that the district clerk is hereby authorized and directed to publish a notice to electors in substantially the form attached hereto as Attachment 1 in the Daily Jefferson County Union within 10 days of the adoption of the foregoing. Be it further resolved that pursuant to Section 67.056A, A2.A of the Wisconsin statutes, the district clerk is hereby directed to submit the foregoing initial resolution to the electors for approval or rejection at November 8th, 2022 election. The initial resolution shall not be effective unless adopted by a majority of the school district electors voting at the referendum.
Wow, I'll second all of that.
All right.
Well done.
We have a motion by Ms. Selly, a second by Ms. Reynolds, and that will be a roll call. Ms. Haas.
Mrs. Bookta,
Yes.
Mr. Rogers,
Yes.
Mrs. Selly,
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mr. Nickram.
Yes. Alrighty, moving to Resolution F here. Again, if we can read that out loud, I think that would be a good thing.
Be it resolved by the School Board of the School District of Fort Atkinson, Jefferson, and Rock County, Wisconsin, that the final school district budget, beginning with the 2022-23 school year, shall include an amount not to exceed $3 million each year on a recurring basis, and the following not to exceed amounts on a non-recurring basis for a period of 3 years: $4 million in the 2023-24 school year, $4 million in the 2024-25 school year, and $5 million in the 2025-26 school year, all in excess of the revenue limits imposed by Section 121.91 of Wisconsin statutes for the purpose of paying district operating costs in support of cultivating an inclusive, high-performing culture of growth and community. Be it further resolved that pursuant to Section 121.91, Parent 3 of Wisconsin statutes, that the foregoing resolution be submitted to electors for the approval or rejection at the election be held on November 8th, 2022. I so move.
I'll
Second.
Either one.
All right. We have a motion by Mr. Rogers, a second by Ms. Bookta, and a roll call. Ms. Haas.
Mrs. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mrs. Bookta,
Yes.
Mr. Rogers,
Yes.
Mrs. Selly,
Yes.
Mr. Nickram.
Yes. Alrighty, moving on to G. This one, if we so choose, can just be read, be as read, unless somebody wants to read the entire page.
Wow.
I think choral reading would be awesome.
Can I just make a motion that we pass the page-long resolution on G
As read, yeah.
without reading it, as you
Yes.
suggested?
Yes.
If so, I so move.
All right.
I'll second.
We're good with that. We're good with that. You said?
If we can just put it as written.
As read, yes.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Okay. And the roll call,
Well, yep. A motion by Mr. Rogers, a second by Ms. Reynolds, and a roll call.
Mrs. Selly,
Yes.
Mrs. Reynolds,
Yes.
Mrs. Bookta,
Yes.
Mr. Rogers,
Yes.
Mr. Nickram.
Yes. Alrighty, moving along to items for future board meetings. Dr. Abbott?
Yes, while we still have some summer school programming going, as summer is quickly winding down, we'll be excited to provide a summer school report a little later this fall. And then also the 2022-23 academic and career plan will also be providing an update to school performance related to accountability measures and some of our other strategic plan measures a little later in the fall as well.
All right, fantastic. Alrighty, moving to the last one of the evening, a resolution to adjourn.
Be it resolved that the Board of Education adjourn.
Second?
All right, motion by Ms. Reynolds, a second by Mr. Rogers. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And those opposed. Alrighty, meeting is concluded at 7:09 PM.